anti-war left, or the dumb left, as the late Michael Brooks and Sam Cedar refer to them as. And I've watched this. Is not just a video to take a dig at Diane Abbott. This thread is full of videos and things that really don't make sense from people in Britain. I think John McDonald's in one of these, or is quoted in one of these. But the simple fact is this. I asked for a video, to be honest, and someone produced it, of Diane Abbott saying some really, really stupid things, and we're going to do our best to debunk her. So let's go.
We see that the United States has decided that it needs to send US and other NATO troops to Russia's borders.
Okay, so why did the US do that? It was in response to Russia militarizing, right, putting 100,000 troops originally on the Ukrainian border. This was pre-invasion. And let's not forget that NATO is on Russia's border. You know, this map, you can see is Russia here, the big one. We'll use this one. So Russia here, the big one here. You know, this big country. So Russia is. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Now, Ukraine is here, right? I think that's Ukraine is here. So, of course, these countries are scared they're going to be invaded. And so they welcomed more NATO troops coming in. And the question the anti-war left, or the dumb left, need to ask themselves is, why were these countries here so desperate to join NATO? Why? Why is that? Is it because they had a history with this big country here that has invaded them and put up the what Churchill dubbed the Iron Curtain? As much as I hate Winston Churchill, do you remember that in history class? Did they teach you that? Because honestly, like, you know, it's just such a stupid statement to make. Like, these countries asked for more NATO troops because they are scared they were going to be invaded next, or at some point, by the Russians. Russia started the escalation of tensions by putting 100,000 troops on the borders of a sovereign country. You're not allowed to do that. If you do that, you escalate tensions.
This alone should tell us that the claims that Russia is the aggressor should be treated skeptically.
Okay, again, you know, Russia started the escalations. It wasn't the Americans, for once. It was the Russians. Like, how is that hard for people to understand? She completely misses and doesn't talk about the bit where Russia actually put more troops on the border with Ukraine initially. That's what started this this recent series of escalations. Why did you not mention that, Diane Abbott? Why?
The destabilization in the entire region comes from a continued eastward expansion of NATO.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It really doesn't. NATO have been in and around Russia for a long time now. Look at 2004. These countries have been NATO members. Poland, 1999. You know, these Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, they're pretty much right on the border with Russia. How can you argue it's NATO expansionism that's caused this? It simply does not make any sense to blame NATO on this. It really doesn't. Also, one more thing here. When with Putin threatening countries like Finland and Sweden, telling them, oh, don't join NATO, we're going to invade, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to go join NATO. It's a defence pact. When one country's attacked, they all jump in to protect that specific country. Just like if Ukraine was a member of NATO and Russia had attacked Ukraine, everyone would have to have jumped in. Otherwise, you weaken the whole point of NATO and you kind of abandon the whole thing.
We need to find peaceful solutions to a complicated conflict of identities and national rights.
And to an extent, she's true. We do need to find a peaceful solution. But, Diane, there's one group of people who went in there with tanks, artillery, planes, started bombing buildings. If the Russians had come in to the UN and said, look, you know, you've got a massive problem here with Russian, you know, separatists in parts of eastern Ukraine who see themselves as Russian, you know, maybe that's part we can absorb into Russia or make an independent state, because they don't see themselves as Ukrainian for the most part. They see themselves as Russian. Maybe you could have got somewhere with that kind of rationale. I'm not saying 100% that would have worked. There's been fighting in Ukraine for such a long time now, but maybe that would have been one way to end the civil war in Ukraine. But instead, my G went in there with tanks and guns. Like, at that point, there's only one aggressor. That's you. When you put that many troops on the borders of another country, that aggression is on you. Like 100,000 troops. Are there 100,000 NATO troops in Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania? I don't think so.
This was done elsewhere in Eastern Europe.
Yeah, because they did so peacefully. Yeah, They weren't, how many of these were caused by not just, there were fights and things like that in Eastern Europe over some of the separations, but no other big country went in there and invaded to cause this, to cause a separation.
As countries peacefully separated. But the approach of the British government and others is in the opposite direction. The United States has only just ended one disastrous, prolonged war in Afghanistan.
Which is true. That, congratulations, Biden. You did the right thing for once.
And many here seem to be gung-ho about starting another one.
No one is, literally hardly anyone is talking about invading Russia or attacking Russia. Even people who have, talked about setting up a no-fly zone have been kind of mocked on the internet, because once you do a no-fly zone, you shoot down a Russian jet, that's an act of war. So again, her point makes no sense. Boris Johnson hasn't talked about an all-out war with Russia. Joe Biden hasn't talked about it. I've not seen anything from President Macron or any other world leader really about starting a war with Russia. So where have you got this from, Diane? Honestly, where have you heard this?
The public is opposed to war with Russia.
True. And that's why, literally, not even the Tory party are talking about a war with Russia. If anything, they would want to avoid that because, let's be real here, there's a lot of money they get from Russia. That's why they're not dropping sanctions. So, again, what are you talking about?
Which would be extremely dangerous
No
for
doubt.
all sides, not least the people of Ukraine. NATO is a nuclear power, and so is Russia. We need de-escalation and dialogue.
Sure, the Ukrainians are asking for a ceasefire. And, the only dialogue Vladimir Putin's come back with is rockets, artillery, and bullets. So how do you talk with a person that's just full of that, full of bile and venom? What do you do, Diane? How do you talk to Vlad? You can say, hey, Vlad, if your boys can stop shooting me for 5 minutes, I'll try and chat to you. Vlad's like, nah, pew, pew, pew. USSR or Russia. Honestly, I just don't understand these people.
Not militarization and threats.
I mean, again, if someone starts attacking you, are you supposed to say, oh, look, man, just stop it, and you get hit in the face again? Oh, man, I don't want to fight you. You got to fight back at some point. And, to the West credit, we haven't actually got involved in Ukraine. Should I say discredit in some ways? But, we've armed the Ukrainians, and they're doing their best to fight back. What are we supposed to do, Diane? Should we let Ukraine be taken over? What do you do at that point? I genuinely don't understand what the anti-war left want here, because you can't open up dialogue with him because he doesn't want dialogue. He wants to take over Ukraine. How do you speak to a person like that? It beggars belief, honestly. This is not just a dig at Diana, but I could have probably done a video about some of the other ones in this thread. This was just the one that was pointed out to me, and the one I asked specifically for, really, did anyone actually make these sorts of statements? And someone told me yes. I said, have you got video? They sent me this, and I was like, cool, don't really have much choice now at this point. But anyways, I'm gonna leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. If it gets a bit toxic in the comments, I will just start just deleting comments. Don't really care. But if you genuinely think there's a way to talk to Russia, how do you do it? If you're genuinely on the anti-war left, right? What are you proposing to stop this conflict? Because people don't want to sacrifice Ukraine. Asking Ukraine to sacrifice itself to stop the further Russian invasion of Europe makes no sense. So no, that's not going to be an option. But I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.